In the heart of the American West, where the sun beat down on dusty plains and the wind whispered through canyons, stories were born not from books, but from blood, sweat, and gunpowder. This was a land where honor was a luxury and survival was the only law. And in this unforgiving landscape, the line between a hero and a villain wasn't a boundary. It was a blurred, shifting horizon. Our story isn't about a legendary gunslinger or a lawman with a shining badge. It's about a man named Eli Thorne, a man who tried to leave his past behind. Eli was once a ghost, a shadow of the bloody civil war he fought in, but he found a new life in a small, hopeful town called Redemption Creek. Here, he traded his pistol for a plow and his haunted memories for the quiet joy of a wife and a daughter who adored him. He believed that he had found his peace, that the violence was finally over. But peace is a fragile thing in a land ruled by greed. The Union Pacific Rail, a colossal force of steel and ambition, began to snake its way through the territory. At its head was Silas Blackwood, a man as ruthless as the land itself, who saw land not as homes, but as resources to be exploited. He sent his men to Redemption Creek, offering pennies for acres and threats for those who refused to sell. Eli watched from the sidelines, telling himself it wasn't his fight. He'd done his time fighting wars and saving strangers. But when Blackwood's men torched his friend's farm and pointed their threats directly at his family, something old and dangerous awakened within him. The scars of his past felt fresh again. The dusty plow couldn't protect him now. The quiet life was over. The only question was what he would become next, a target for a powerful corporation or the kind of man he had sworn he would never be again. The line had been crossed, and Eli was about to step over it. Eli's attempts at a peaceful resolution were met with a brutal reality. Blackwood wasn't a man of words. He was a man of action, and his actions were savage. The day after Eli's farm was burned, a group of Blackwood's men rode into Redemption Creek, their faces hidden by bandanas. They weren't there to talk. They were there to intimidate. They shot up the saloon, terrified families, and left a message painted in black tar on the town's water tower: sell or suffer. This was the moment of truth. Eli, with the fire of forgotten soldier in his eyes, stood before the terrified townsfolk. He didn't offer them a speech. He offered them a choice. We can sell our homes and become vagabonds on our own land, or we can stand our ground. I'm not a lawman and I'm not a hero. I'm a man protecting my family. But if you stand with me, we can make this their last stop. The first challenge was the water supply. Blackwood's men, led by a brute named Stone, were tasked with sealing off Redemption Creek's main well. Eli knew he couldn't fight them head-on. He and a handful of trusted men, including an old prospector named Jasper and a young ranch hand named Cody, devised a plan. They would use the natural terrain to their advantage. Under cover of darkness, they rigged a series of tripwires and rock slides at the narrow canyon leading to the well. When Stone's crew rode in, they were met not with bullets, but with a landslide that blocked their path and sent their horses scattering. Confusion turned into panic, and Eli's men, waiting in the brush, disarmed them without a single shot fired. It was a small victory, but ignited a flicker of hope in the town. Blackwood's response was swift and merciless. He sent a heavily armed mercenary squad, led by a cold-eyed man known as a colonel, a veteran as cunning as Eli. The colonel's team moved with military precision, flanking the town and setting up a siege. This was no longer a skirmish. It was war. Eli's knowledge of guerrilla tactics, learned in the trenches of the Civil War, became their only hope. He and his small band used the town's buildings as cover, creating a maze of ambushes and traps. The fight raged for a day and a night, with every rooftop and every alley becoming a battlefield. Eli, fueled by the memory of his daughter's face, fought with ferocity he thought he had buried long ago. In a tense, close-quarters gunfight, he managed to disarm and capture the colonel, forcing his men to retreat. But Eli knew this was just the beginning. Blackwood had endless resources, and Redemption Creek was running out of time and ammunition. They needed to hit him where it hurt, his wallet. Eli proposed a plan so audacious it seemed insane. They would rob the Union Pacific Rail's most secure money train. This wasn't about personal gain. It was about survival. The heist wasn't for gold. It was for their freedom. The plan was a masterstroke of precision and timing. Eli, Jasper, and Cody waited for the train at a remote trestle bridge over a deep ravine. The script detailed every nerve-wracking second. The roar of the locomotive, the thunderous shaking of the bridge, the synchronized climb onto the roof of the moving train. Eli, a ghost of his former self, navigated the treacherous rooftops, dodging bullets from the guards. He faced off against Blackwood's top enforcer, a formidable man with a shotgun, in a brutal hand-to-hand fight on the edge of the rushing abyss. Eli used his wits, not just his brawn, to defeat the man, sending him plummeting into the ravine below. With the guards neutralized, they breached the armored car and, instead of taking the gold, they sabotaged the financial ledgers and destroyed the deeds to all the land Blackwood had purchased from the townspeople. They left the gold untouched, a message to Blackwood that this wasn't about money. It was about justice. The heist was a success, but it turned Eli from a local defender into a federal fugitive. The law would now be after him, and Blackwood would not rest until he was dead. Eli knew there was no going back. He had become what he swore he wouldn't be, an outlaw, but he did it not for himself, but for Redemption Creek. The final act was set in motion, not in the dusty plains, but in the heart of Blackwood's empire. Eli had chosen his path, and was a one-way trip to either glory or the grave. Eli knew the train heist would push Blackwood over the edge. Now a federal fugitive, he was a hunted man, but he had one last card to play. He sent a message to Blackwood, daring him to a final showdown, not in a dusty saloon, but at the heart of Blackwood's power, the Union Pacific Rail's main office in the bustling city of Providence. The scene was set. Eli, dressed not as an outlaw but in the worn clothes of a man of the people, walked into the opulent office, where Blackwood was surrounded by his lawyers and officials. This was no gunfight. This was a battle for public opinion. Eli stood before them, a testament to Blackwood's ruthlessness. He didn't deny his crimes. He owned them. "They'll tell you I'm a thief," he said, his voice echoing in the silent room. "And they're right. I robbed a train. But they won't tell you why. They won't tell you about the farms they burned, the families they threatened, or the lives they destroyed. You say I broke the law, Mr. Blackwood, but you broke something far more important. The people's trust. The gold is still on that train. I didn't steal it for myself. I stole the proof of your greed." Before Blackwood could react, Eli's allies from Redemption Creek, whom he had arranged to meet, burst in with a team of journalists. They had evidence of Blackwood's land fraud and threats. Eli's words and the journalist's proof were a 1-2 punch that Blackwood couldn't recover from. The officials, seeing their reputation and careers on the line, turned on Blackwood. He was arrested, and the Union Pacific Rail's reign of terror was over. Eli had won, but victory came at a price. He was still an outlaw, a man who had broken the law. He looked at the townsfolk, who saw him not as a criminal, but as a savior. With a final, knowing nod to his family, he turned and walked out, leaving the city behind. He had done what was necessary, and now he had to face the consequences. In the final narration, a single horseman rides off into the sunset. The voice of the narrator is calm, reflective. Eli had done what he had to do. He crossed that line, not for profit, but for a people. In the untamed days of the West, the law was a luxury few could afford. Sometimes, the only way to save a life was to break a rule. So, was Eli Thorne a rebel, or was he a survivor? Perhaps he was both, a living testament to the truth that in the shadows, a righteous heart can still find its own light. The screen fades black, leaving the question hanging in the air.